Hello again, friends. Welcome back. My name's Oscar Montesiga. I'm a certified wine and spirits instructor for the International Wine and Spirits Guild. And thanks for joining me here at the Booze Library of Uncorked Vintage Academia. Happy Whiskey Wednesday. Today I'm going to bring you a special whiskey for this Whiskey Wednesday. I hope you're having a great time. You know, it's happy hour somewhere. So, today's whiskey, I'm excited because, yes, you see other whiskeys coming out of this country, but maybe none as exciting as this that I've encountered so far. And it is, I guess, exciting for me because it's a little outlier. It's kind of drawing outside the box, so to speak. And I hope you get to try it if you get your hands on this bottle, if you have it in your market. So Brenne comes from France. It's a French single malt. It's a single malt that spends about 6 years or over 6 years in a Cognac Cask, and it's their basic label because they also do have a limited release 10-year single malt from the same producers, Brenne. The liaison is with Alison Park. She's an American entrepreneur, but she is in liaison with the master distiller at the estate, and in the particular estate, they've been making spirits since the 1920s, so they have a third-generation master distiller in the area of Charente, and Charente is basically the regional area where Cognac is in Western France. So we're talking about Western France by the Atlantic seaboard. It's just north of Bordeaux, so it is kind of delimited by that area. It's north of Bordeaux. If you can place Bordeaux on a map, geographically kind of center, western center or western middle France, by the Atlantic coast, north of Bordeaux, you would have the region of Charente. And in Charente, that's where they make cognac. So they have a family tradition of distilling spirits and eau de vie. And from that tradition, having already pot stills around, or what we call the Charente still, that's the still from Charente, we have a single malt with basically organic French-grown local barley. So that is a barley malt, and it spends its life aging in Limousin barrels or Limousin oak barrels out of the forest there, on the east side of Charente and Bordeaux, and basically east of the coast. It's an exciting whiskey. Let's give it a go. It's at 40% ABV. We're tasting neat. The cognac is clear. The single malt is clear, and its color, it's light honey. It's got a straw transition and a thin, clear edge. My nasal impact is mostly drying. There's a slight prickling on the nose, but it's mostly drying. And that's on the nose where you're gonna first notice, I think, the uniqueness of this single malt, because it's out there. There's a lot of banana leaf or banana, ripe banana, candy banana, almost like a banana bubblegum, you know, from the 90s. But there's also pretty and subtle, more traditional things like orchard fruit, some red apple, green pear, fresh pear, ripe pear. There's also a florality, a pretty floral aroma from chamomile. There's honey, floral honey. But the fruit, the tropical banana, and it's really what hits you in the face, that, well, you're like, wow, maybe I did not expect that. And I think all that fruitiness comes from the yeast and the cognac barrels. Furthermore, there's a little bit of vanilla and slight touch of caramel. There's also something fresh and savory and herbaceous like fennel. So its production intensity is adequate and simple. And that being said, I don't necessarily smell the malt. It's mostly fruitiness and sweetness, but obviously there's again floral notes and some spice. The intensity of élevage is adequate and complex. As we just recalled, there's a lot of complexity on my nose. Its persistence is average, and the character is very fine because I do want to keep smelling it. I want to go back to it. It's not an uber complex spirit that evolves, and I think the smells for the most part remain the same or linear, but it is very fine because I enjoy this. I could smell it all day long. Very nice job on the aromatics here. Let's give it a taste. So the primary mouthfeel effect is coating. There is a very slight astringency, especially towards the front of the mouth, and there's also a little bit of warming sensation, but primarily is coating. And then the alcohol is smooth and sufficient. It's a medium body whiskey. The primary taste is sweet. However, there's a small highlight that I get that is both sour and bitter. So those two things, the sourness and bitterness, are balancing the sweetness on the palate. And also it's a buttery smoothness, mouthfeel wise. On the palate, the flavors are mimicking the nose. I revisit the bubblegum, the bananas 90s bubblegum. But the palate is a lot more complex. I also get the vanilla transforms into vanilla custard with a burnt sugar layer. So we have a creme brulee. We have the malt. The malt is actually present on the palate, so I can taste the barley. I can still taste the apple and pear. However, I can furthermore taste things like clove and nutmeg, so it becomes also more not spicier in a piquant sense, but spicier with more spices. And there's a little bit of caramel. There's a little bit of like a bread pudding influence, and part of that breadiness is the single malt, the barley. There's a little bit of nuttiness, walnut and almond. Fairly to say that it is coming from the malt, as well as maybe a partial of the barrel. And there's also a little bit of touch of ginger on the palate. So the palate does become more complex, and thankfully to show the craftsmanship that we can taste the malt, whereas on my nose it was kind of hiding below all the fruity factors, all the stereoisomers that reminded me of tropical fruits and bubblegums and vanilla and caramel and floral notes, etc. On the palate you will taste the malt. The flavors are concentrated and they are complex. The balance is harmonious, and it's got a very long pleasant finish. It's very pleasant, it's harmoniously balanced, and very long. It's over 8 seconds. You're gonna still taste the flavors there. So overall, my impression of this single malt is excellent. It's an excellent single malt because it is balanced, it's exciting, it's unique, and coming from France, it's not necessarily a country you think of typically of buying a whiskey from. You are gonna get wines and other spirits like brandy. cognac or Armagnac or Calvados out of France that are renowned. Maybe even some absinthe, or maybe even some vermouth, world-class vermouth and absinthe coming out of France. And whiskey is world class. It's just not necessarily very well known. I think if you like smoky scotches, you will not necessarily love this. It's not for you. But think of this single malt definitely more on the slightly Irish tradition that's a little more fruit forward, or even from Scotland, coming from the lowlands, where things are lighter and fruitier. Some Speyside whiskies can have this profile of a lot of peaches, apricots, nectarines, pears, and apples, so they can be fruity, but not to the extent of this having so much rich tropical banana type aromas. But with that said, I would highly recommend you trying it. It's an exciting whiskey. And also with that said, I think their 10-year single malt, it's gonna be less tropical. It's less in your face. It's less concentrated. It's a little leaner. And with that said, it is more like a traditional lowland single malt, or even a light Irish whiskey. But it's fun. Thanks for watching. I'm gonna give you my last notes on pairings for this whiskey, and I think it would definitely be perfect if you have meat, charcuterie boards, cheeses. You know, keep it traditional French cheese and fromage and charcuterie style items. But it can also work with salads, and especially if those salads include fruits, whether it's berries or some peaches or some tropical fruits. The salads and with the vinaigrette would work well with the whiskey. And furthermore, I would also like to put this on the spectrum of some desserts that bridge the flavor qualities. And with that in mind, I have baklava. I feel like baklava that has a little bit of honey, a little bit of nuttiness, and this light, airy puff pastry, kind of phyllo pastry that's crunchy and light. A little bit of rose water gives you a little bit of florality on the baklava. I think that would be a neat pairing. So even though the whiskey is not properly sweet with sugar, there is a lot of tropical, sweet and overripe fruit qualities that I think would be a nice match for the baklava, or even something maybe even less sweet, like mamoul out of the Middle East. So I hope you get to try it if you get your hands on them. Fun French whiskey, or eau de vie, the bière. Basically barley eau de vie, aged in cognac. Beautiful presentation. I love the Brenne bottles with the glass raised. Beautiful color on the label. Blue is my favorite color, by the way. So whenever I saw this, I'm like, ooh, that looks sexy. It's French. It's elegant. It's blue. It's single malt. On the back you have fleur de lis. It's delicious and fun to try. So thanks for watching, guys. Hit subscribe and like. I know you know how. Let me your comments on anything that you learned today, or you want to learn furthermore, and anything you want me to review in the future, whether it's another spirit or a cocktail. But again, thanks for watching. I appreciate you, and cheers. Slancha, Sante.